So I've seen people talking about this headline. I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh ahead of time, but it's just, I'm going to try and have my thoughts be more structured than usual so I can get across, because honestly, I'm just speechless. I don't know if this is rage bait or something, but the headline reads, Lord of the Rings demonizes people of color, students told. University suggests Tolkien's treatment of evil characters follows a tradition of anti-African antipathy. From what I understand, Tolkien was building a mythic world based on ancient European folklore, and he wasn't running a political commentary. I know this is hard to grasp, but not everybody in the world that exists now or back then necessarily always had politics on the brain. And if I'm being honest, I honestly don't get how people are coming to this very wild conclusion. There's no clear link between his depiction of evil and race unless you're already looking for it. It feels like people are projecting their own modern ideas onto something that was never written with that lens. And honestly, it makes it sound as though the people who believe this or writing this are the ones who can't stop thinking in racial terms. If your mind immediately jumps to, damn, these creatures that have more European features, if anything, and accents must represent people of color, that says more about your own assumptions than about the actual writing. Not everything in fiction has to be dissected through the lens of race. Sometimes evil's just evil. It's not some coded metaphor for people's skin. I mean, the title's already ridiculous enough, but what makes it even more funny shouldn't be the word that I'm using. Yeah, what makes it more ridiculous, I should say, is how people keep throwing around the term people of color. Grammatically, and I keep saying this and I will keep saying it, and I know people will shill for it, but really think about it for a second. Grammatically, it's exactly the same phrase flipped around. I know that sounds like a revelation, but it's not. It's literally the same phrase flipped around. You know? Like, you know how in Spanish, you'll say something like Stephanie's garden. So in Spanish, you flip it around, it's like El Jardín de Estefania. So it's the garden of Stephanie versus Stephanie's garden. Means the same thing. Means exactly the same thing. Lord of War, warlord. Dog of Fred, Fred's dog. I don't know why we have to be explaining grammar to people in the year 2025 who are adults and already had it. Same words, same order of meaning. An adjective describing a noun based on pigmentation. The rearrangement of the words doesn't magically remove the baggage of the phrase. People of color literally means people who are colored. The prepositional of just makes it sound more polite and academic, but the implication is exactly the same. It's like how people would say something that are racist, trying not to sound racist. And I honestly don't get why we pretend one is acceptable and the other is offensive when they both linguistically express the same thing. We're just playing this whole linguistic game to make everyone feel more progressive while still labeling people by their skin tone. That's why I find it really absurd when articles like this try to frame everything through, people of color versus white characters. The phrase itself is this really obvious reminder of the same division it supposedly is meant to transcend. If you have to constantly categorize people that way to make your argument, then maybe the problem isn't Tolkien, but your perception and lens through which you see the world. And I like how white people always stay white, but Black people have to always be changing. They can't just be black. Weird. So anyway, let's actually get to the article. For those of you probably driving and you can't read it. So this part right here starts by saying, a university is teaching students that J.R.R. Tolkien demonizes people of color in the Lord of the Rings books. A history module called Decolonizing Tolkien et al., taught at the University of Nottingham, uses a text that says orcs and other dark-skinned characters in the trilogy are victims of ethnic chauvinism. Okay. Dr. Onyeka Nubia, a historian and writer who leads the module, argues that Eastern races in the fictional realm of Middle-earth are depicted as evil, while fair-skinned peoples of the West are shown as virtuous. In academia, decolonizing usually means re-examining or moving away from white Western viewpoints. I'm really trying here, like bending over backwards, slipping in between the toes of Cthulhu levels of effort to figure out how they're drawing a line between Africans and orcs. I've turned it over in my head every possible way, and I still can't make sense of it. Like, how do you even get there? These are fictional creatures in a world built entirely from Tolkien's imagination, yet somehow people have managed to drag racial politics into Mordor. Yeah, anyway, in the module's core text, Dr. Onyeka writes that maligned peoples include Easterlings, Southrons, and men from Harad. The trilogy also features the dark-skinned orcs, evil creatures that do the bidding of Sauron, known as the Dark Lord. So I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second, because if you look outside of the orcs at the fantasy peoples over the Lord of Rings map to real world groups, you can see some similarities. But the main thing to also remember is that every folklore on Earth uses visual shorthand, like skin tones, mask colors, body paint, hair and eye color, fabrics, to quickly signal to audiences who's otherworldly, dangerous, or virtuous. It's a storytelling tool. When people write folklore or fantasy, they're always going to show contrast, something that feels other so the audience can quickly recognize the difference, but still kind of grounded in reality, sort of. I wouldn't necessarily say that's racism or cultural targeting. Most of the time, it's just storytelling. It helps make the world feel alive and distinct. I mean, when consider why American works always have their villains or people from other countries sounding British, even though they're from Rome or some other country, and they always let the audience know the person is speaking another language outside of English by just giving them a British accent, even though it sounds ridiculous. Does it mean that Americans hate British people and see every single one of them as evil villains? No, it doesn't. It's just the easiest way to other the villain or other those people that are clearly not of the English-speaking place or the place that the story is built on. Because I'm pretty sure that in Lord of the Rings, Frodo Baggins and his friends are not speaking English. But since the story focuses on them, then they're gonna sound like the majority of the audience that this is directed towards. I mean, look at Avatar. The Na'vi clearly pull visual and cultural cues from places like Africa, New Zealand, Native America. Like, there's so many native traditions, and you can see, even on Earth, similarities across the globe. I mean, tribal markings aren't only inherent to African colonies. Human beings as a whole are very similar when it comes to creativity. We're all the same species, so you can bet that an idea that you've had, somebody else has done it somewhere else across the world. If you have hair, someone has dreaded or locked their hair. If you have hair, someone has figured out how to braid or twist their hair, or put it in a bun, or tie it in a ponytail. If you have fingers, you've touched things you're probably not supposed to touch. You've looked at the birds if you have eyes and envisioned yourself flying. Every culture, every human has done this. So even though in stories like the Avatar movies that they pull from these native traditions, they're not meant to be those nationalities. I've never looked at the Na'vi and been like, oh crap, them's Ugandan people or Trini. Like, no, they're just fire, earth, and air Na'vi. That's what they are. What the hell is that creature? Oh my god, that's so beautiful. What is that thing? Damn, do you see that? I want to eat it. It's so satisfying, those wings. Just want to rip them off and cook them. But anyway, like I was saying, they're inspired by the feel of those cultures, for want of a better phrase, because it instantly signals to the viewer that this is something unfamiliar, something alien. And it's not just Western creators that do that. People in non-white countries do the same thing. They'll make pale, foreign, or strangely colored beings to stand apart from their own. It doesn't mean they hate white people or people of that color. It just makes the story's contrast clear. These people are gorgeous, Jesus. You see them? They understand the difference between fantasy and reality. A white spirit or a pale face in fiction isn't a commentary on Europeans or Middle Easterns. It's just a way to show variety, tension, and difference in a world that isn't ours. And across world traditions, you constantly see beings with very different skin colors, including stark white, used to differentiate roles without implying anything about actual ethnic groups. For example, Dogon from the Mali stories or folklore is a trickster or disorder figure, Yurugu, the pale fox, and it's literally marked by pallor or pale white, which is symbolized by incompleteness or cosmic disorder. Not Europeans, has nothing to do with white people. From Nigeria, or the Igbo, there's spirit world imagery often used. I think it's called Nzu or Nzu. Not really sure how it's pronounced. But it's where they take white chalk and it's a symbol of like ritual purity, or they just mark themselves with it. And their whole thing is like masquerading spirits appear chalk white because white reads as a spirit threshold, not white people. Then there's Yoruba Abatala, which is associated with white cloth, or funfun, as a symbol of clarity and moral order. Again, color as a cosmology, not ethnicity or nationality. In Japan, we have the Yuki-onna, is a predatory spirit with skin as white as snow. Her whiteness signals cold, deathly liminality, not white people. For Japan again, Oni come in a variety of colors: red, blue, black, yellow, or white. And these colors telegraph their temperament or domain, like anger, doubt, etc. Not human races or people with those skin colors. In Islamic folklore, jinn are even classed by colors in some traditions, like red or white. Now, there were terminologies, like with China, where they referred to Westerners as yang guizi, or foreign devils, or hong mao, red-haired barbarians, and they basically cast pale-skinned outsiders as demonic enemies in popular speech and imagery. And this also happens alongside the encounters with Europeans and Japanese. Those are real-world situations. That is different. But for most of history, people actually understood this kind of thing. I'm sure you could pull these parallels from Star Wars or Star Trek as well. But most people seem to understand the difference between storytelling contrast and outright racism. Unless it was something really blatant, like blackface or caricature meant to mock a specific group, no one assumed that a dark or light character symbolized an entire race in a fantasy setting. We've seen real intentional mockery before, like the exaggerated blackface that I talked about, performances in the early American media, or the racist depictions of black people that occasionally popped up in Japan, or even of Asian people in America. Those were made to ridicule, not to tell a story. It's not the same thing as using contrast in a fictional world. There are countless films where the villain happens to be white, or black, or Native American, or East Asian. My favorite movies, by the way, Kung Fu Hustle. As ridiculous as it is, it still seems to hold up. I don't know how it's possible given the release date of this movie, but yet they'll have you believe that it's impossible. Look at this.
Now that you are here, you are doomed to die.
Please don't watch it in the English dub. Holy shit. Sorry. Nobody with common sense assumes that means the writer hates that group unless the creator explicitly says otherwise. It's just part of the story. So the fact that someone was even able to pull the whole racism thing from Lord of the Rings out of the ether tells me that there's a deeper problem with perception. Look, they even try to change the title because this is what the new one is, but the old one was this. But I think the deeper meaning to all of this is the way that people are being taught to see the world. Honestly, it's my belief that if you train students or people to look for racism in everything, they're gonna find it, even when it's not there. You can always draw parallels to everything. That's the danger of these decolonizing classes when they're handled this way. They don't teach critical thinking, they teach to be suspicious. Everything becomes this coded message about race, and that mindset spreads like a virus. And honestly, it's just really ridiculous. It gets even more ridiculous. If you keep digging that deep for hidden racism, you can literally apply it to anything. By that logic, even Labradors are problematic. There are black Labradors, brown Labradors, or not Chesapeake Bay Retrievers, the Chesapeake color, which is usually like a liver chestnut in horses. And there's cream colored or tan ones. And what if, like most people, even though black is the most popular color, what if everyone's like, you know what, I want the cream ones because we saw those ones in movies and they're easier to see at night if they run off. But oh no, that's not fair, right? Because that means people are racist towards black people because they don't want the black dog. Or there's more people buying the cream colored ones. Like, should we start holding symposiums about the socio-political implications of Labrador puppy color distribution? That's a level of absurdity I'm talking about. And all this kind of thinking does is make people more paranoid. You cannot build a better world or a fairer world by teaching people to interpret every single shade of fiction for fantasy as racial symbolism. Sometimes a dark creature is just a dark creature. This part of the article says, in the model's core text, Dr. Onyeka writes that malign people include Easterlings, Southrons, and men from Harad. The trilogy also features the dark-skinned orcs, evil creatures that do the bidding of Sauron, known as the Dark Lord. That part right there, the part with the orcs, to me, it's so unbelievably stupid that it borders on self-parody. The author genuinely thinks that, or the person who's teaching the kids genuinely thinks that Tolkien is using the word dark to mean dark-skinned as in race, not dark as in evil. Because that's the way it comes across. It's like they've never cracked open a dictionary or taken a single literature class before deciding to teach one. In literature, dark has always referred to the concept of evil, corruption, or malevolence, not melanin levels. You can have a dark heart and still be of a light shade. That's basic metaphorical language. Doesn't mean it's a racial descriptor. Every culture on Earth has used darkness and light symbolically. Light for clarity, goodness, warmth, darkness for danger, deceit, and the unknown. It's psychological, especially when you consider that human beings, being ocular, require light to see. And anything that is of the dark, humans are not down with that. We're actually trained, or we've evolved to fear the dark. Because in our human forms, we cannot see in the dark. Even people with darker skin can fear the dark because it symbolizes the unknown, and the unknown is usually scary. And then they couple that with evil, and then you're happy when the daytime comes because now you can see where you're stepping. You don't have to wonder where the whispers and the snap of a twig is coming from, or something running up on you and slicing your neck off. And what further makes this laughable is that these people are taking those universal archetypes and twisting them into racial commentary as if Tolkien was secretly sitting there being like, yes, evil shall be brown. I mean, if we're gonna go by that logic, should the Dark Ages also be considered anti-African slurs now? Like, should we decolonize nighttime while we're at it? This level of over-analysis, as I would call it, it doesn't feel like it comes from intelligence. It comes from the desperation to find offense. I'm not saying all the time that's the case, but a lot of the times that is the case, especially now. They're reading color into places where color shouldn't even exist. Just shadows and themes and mythic duality. And the worst part is they're teaching this to the younger generation. They're teaching them to think this way as if mistranslating symbolism into skin tone is the moral high ground that they should be taking. And people can see right through it, and it's intellectual laziness, and they're pretending as though it is peak intellectualism when it's in fact activism dressed up as that. And they're wringing their hands over darkness being associated with evil, yet in the real world, the irony is that the darkest people come from like the brightest places, the hottest regions on the planet, where the sun blazes really, really, really bright. Those are the people that usually have the darker skin tones. So it's like, I don't know, I just found that interesting. Kind of poetic, you know, in the irony, the word dark is being vilified by people who don't seem to understand that nature itself paired light and dark for balance, not for it to be morally judged. They're trying to claim that, you know, oh, we're morally righteous, we have the moral high ground. You're completely missing the nuance of the language and the beauty of natural contrast, which should be what you're teaching the people in a class like this. The Dark Lord isn't about pigment. I mean, I don't think I should have to say this. It's about power and corruption and shadow. It's about the dark thoughts that he has and letting the darkness or the night or the unknown take over him. It has nothing to do with someone's freaking epidermis. Stop trying to train people to see prejudice in every metaphor like you do. I completely understand that racism does exist in the real world. I'm not debating that at all. Obviously, I'm not going to sit here with one of these people and being like, there's no such thing as racism. No, there are still genuine problems that need attention. And there's a lot of inequalities. There's prejudice in hiring. There are still those situations out there. There's unfair policing. I understand that, you know, it's not as overblown as the media is trying to fearmonger. But yes, there are those situations out there. I understand that. I get it. But those are real tangible issues with real human cost. But instead of tackling those, some people in academia have decided that fantasy media and novels are the battleground that they're gonna die on, the hill that they're gonna die on. That's what blows my mind. Like, I don't know, I just can't help drawing up different parallels. Let's see another one. Like, if someone gives a weather report and they're like, it's gonna be mostly fair today, someone will find racism in that. Someone even found racism in the phrase good morning. Like, I don't understand. I honestly, I will say, people are like, well, you don't know what Tolkien was thinking. You're right. I don't know if he was actually thinking about racism, but neither do you. And saying that this is what it depicts after the man is long dead and can't defend himself seems very disingenuous. I also don't understand what the line, the witch in the wardrobe, has to do with anything. And they mention, that the Calorman in C.S. Lewis's fantasy novel have been seen by some as exhibiting Oriental stereotypes. They're described as cruel people with long beards and orange-colored turbans. Newsflash, that describes half the ancient world. You can find that imagery in depictions of Persian kings, Indian scholars, or even old European mystics. These were just visual archetypes used to suggest foreign or mysterious in the context of mythic storytelling. It doesn't have to always mean coded racism. This is the part that's kind of confusing to me, where it says that students of the course in Nottingham will also learn to repopulate the canon of British myth and what does that even mean? They're not political committees. Like, they don't need repopulation. You want to add new stories? Go ahead. Nothing's wrong with that. But rewriting all the old ones through a lens of all this modern grievance that people constantly carry on their chests, that's not enriching the literature, obviously. And we've seen that because they've tried to do that with so many media, modernizing them and fixing their art. And all this feels like it's doing is rewriting every piece of media that they see as an issue to fit whatever the current ideology is demanding. So yeah, there is racism in the world, but going after Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and like they're somehow the architects of it, I don't know what they expect to come of that. All this effort could be spent addressing actual racial injustice instead of dissecting whether a mythical talking lion needs diversity training or something. This part of the article says Dr. Nubia, an occasional contributor to the BBC, provided articles saying medieval England had diverse populations and Africans lived there. But ethnic chauvinism was evident in literature, including Milton's Paradise Lost, and the tradition persisted in the works of Tolkien and Lewis. My question is, so what? Like, what the hell does that have to do with Lord of the Rings? I can't really speak on Paradise Lost because I didn't read that. I don't know anything about it, but Lord of the Rings is a subject matter here. And seriously, you can say medieval England had diverse populations and that Africans lived there because yes, they did. That's true to an extent. But can we all agree that even then, the majority of the population was still pale-skinned English people? Honestly, I don't understand where people are coming from with this. Because like going to Nigeria, the country in Africa, and telling a story set centuries ago, and then a bunch of freaking entitled-ass white people start complaining that, oh, they always see black actors on screen, there were Asians and Europeans living in Nigeria too back then. That's missing the ever-loving point. How are people not understanding this? Tolkien wasn't writing about England's diversity census. It's a myth. His stories are a myth. It's fantasy. It's inspired by the environment, language, and history he actually knew. Expecting the Lord of the Rings to reflect modern racial quotas is kind of the same thing as expecting some Norse story or fantasy story to feature frickin' Polynesian warriors or something else like that. And another thing I don't get is if you claim, right, that a particular ethnicity is so hostile towards you, why are you trying so hard to insert yourself in everything that belongs to them? If I truly believed that these whatever colored skin people don't like me, my ass, I wouldn't like them either. I'd be like, you know what? No, I'm not gonna claw my way into every story and space that they have. That's pick me energy. And it doesn't come across as empowering at all. It comes across as desperate. It's not a good look. And the other thing is that it's also very misguided and it breeds resentment. People who normally wouldn't even think about race or color are now constantly forced to. So they start second guessing everything. Is this racist? Am I represented enough? Oh no, I can't look at someone in anime and I can't look at someone who looks different than me and feel like I can connect with that person past their skin color because they don't look like me. And before long, you've trained an entire generation to obsess over pigmentation instead of personality, ethnicity instead of their character. And that is the complete opposite of progressivism, right? People are pretending to be activists for racial justice, and you're doing the complete opposite. And this is how we end up with classrooms where students are taught to view everything through a racial lens, and then we wonder why the world is feeling more divided and people are more obsessed with color. It's because you're behaving as though you're more obsessed with color. And people are like wondering like, okay, well, why do you do videos like this then? Why do you talk about it? Because you seem obsessed with color too. I have to address it, because if we constantly allow one narrative to go out there and constantly divide people, it will just run rampant like it already has until you start seeing it in everything and it's too late. I think this whole approach actually does a gross disservice to people who are dark-skinned and living in these countries. You're not empowering them. All you're doing is breeding fear and paranoia in them. You're teaching them to look at the world through this permanent lens of suspicion, as if everyone who doesn't look like them is automatically out to get them, or who look like one specific person. And you're training people to be anxious in their perceptions of other people who look completely different than them. And the ironic part about all of this is I know plenty of people who've gone back to African countries, like trying to reconnect with their roots and stuff, people who identify as African American, and they've been shocked, I tell you, when the locals didn't welcome them with open arms. Many of the Africans straight up told them, and this is from their own mouths, the Africans told them, African American where? Where are you African? They looked at them and saw Americans, entitled, soft, and out of touch with their actual customs. And a lot of the Americans who share the same skin color of those Africans or people in those African countries, a lot of them are very disrespectful to those cultures. I did a video on one such person who, I guess she wanted to do a business down there, and she was complaining about what was a very mundane occurrence in one of those African countries, and she came off very entitled and rude. And she did not hold back when it came to bashing this country and everything that she found annoying and bad about it because it wasn't like America. And she even said, I'd rather take the racism in America than live in Africa. Like, that's wild, especially when she broad stroked and said Africa and didn't specify the country or the part of the country she was living in, as if every part in Africa is somehow a shithole because it doesn't cater to her needs that she's used to from her American world. And that's something that happens all the time. People don't talk about it, but because you share a skin color doesn't mean you share the culture and values and history of other people that share your skin color. Like, Icelandic people are completely different from Germanic people. Like, I've met people from New Zealand, I've met Kiwis, I've met Germans, I've met Icelandic, I've met Scots. Everybody has a different tradition. You can find some similarities, but they're very different people. Just because they share a skin color doesn't mean, oh, they're just blanketed white. That's an American thing that Americans have put on the rest of the world. The people there don't see you as one of them just because you have melanin or the lack thereof in common. Culture is more than color. And it's weird too, because a lot of people of African descent are Christian, and they'll read the Bible and see angels described in white robes and God clothed in white and Satan as a prince of darkness ruling over principalities of darkness and evil. Nobody bats an eye. They understand its symbolism, not a racial descriptor. And when it comes to fantasy literature, suddenly dark equals racism. People with cloth over their mouth equals these specific people when lots of people do that. How does that make sense? You cannot cherry pick when metaphor is allowed to metaphor or be a metaphor, simile, or however. I'm probably not saying that right, but you know what I mean. And if we're going to take it that literally, then what about all the black people who love wearing white clothing? I knew a guy who only wore white, everything, like head, toe, shoes, cap, everything. He looks incredible. Like, he was strictly about fashion, and all that stuff. And he was very handsome. But he only dressed in white. He liked dressing in white, made him look good. Not once did I look at him and think, oh my God, he must be some kind of supremacist because he's obsessed with the color white. Like, what? This is the kind of confusion we're passing down to the younger generation. We're teaching them to assign moral value to colors and metaphors and aesthetics instead of actions and characters from fantasy novels. We're raising kids to fear shadows that don't exist instead of prepping them for actual dangers, and then wondering why they grow up feeling alienated, anxious, and perpetually offended. Teach these kids to do some freaking taxes, man. Teach them how to start investing, take out Roth IRAs, teach them teach them trades, instead of this shit. How about you provide some some mandatory classes for them to learn actual trades that they can use, that they will never have to worry about losing a job because they will always be required. Welding, medicine, I mean, you know, garbage men. People look down on those things, but you know how much money those garbage men make because nobody wants to do it? Teach them how to do that. Teach them how to build. In my prep school, like, I understand that, you know, the schools here are a little bit different, but in my prep school, we were taught cooking, sewing. The men were taught sewing as well. The boys were taught sewing as well, but they were also taught carpentry, how to weld. I mean, like, every adult thing that people are supposed to know how to do, how to build certain things, how to build a raft, Boy Scouts, like, everyone was taught that. They were taught those basic survival skills, how to sew your clothes, how to wash your clothes, how to cook your own food. Doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man. And most men that I meet, they're better cooks than women. You know, I don't know what that has to do with anything. I'm just saying. And it's like, I don't know what happened over the past 20 years with the school system. It's already bad enough as it was. But it's like they're teaching people to just be useless. And instead of teaching them what really matters, how to stand up to the government, you know, make sure they're not being taken advantage of by people in places of authority, you know, teaching them how to make money for themselves and to start their careers instead of droning on in a job. Why are people not teaching them that? Why are classes not being offered like that? It's very sad. And to some people, it might not seem as big a deal as I'm probably making it seem, but clearly, with everything going on in the world, with people being more obsessed over skin color and being more divided as time goes on, and we've seen that these kinds of lessons are being taught and propagated, obviously it's doing the complete opposite to what these people are setting out to do. Or maybe it's not. Maybe this is exactly what they want. I hope that kids in school, I hope their parents don't have that level of ignorance and they can teach their kids not everyone is going to accept you all the time, but be proud in who you are. Don't be a victim. Make something of yourself. You can achieve anything you want. The mind is the battlefield where the war is won. What did my mom used to say? Battles are won and lost in the mind. If you always believe that you're a victim and everything is set against you, set you up to fail, you will always fail. You will never even try to succeed past what you're told you can only amount to, because why would you? But if you're told that despite all of these obstacles, you are who you are, and your skin color doesn't just define you. What you do with your life and your choices and your own mindset is what defines you. You can achieve anything because there's people who look like you who have achieved it and more. That is what you should be teaching. That's what they taught us when we were growing up. I don't know what happened, but anyway. That's my 2 cents on that. It's concerning that if people are paying tuition to be taught this. But yeah. Anyone who's new to the Lord of the Rings, just enjoy the world. Leave it at the door, because you can find parallels in absolutely everything. You can have a story about blue and purple aliens and still find parallels if you look for them. Recognizing patterns is something that humans do. And I promise you, when writers are making their stories, most of them aren't coming from a place of hatred. They're just building an escape. And they hope that other people can share in it and appreciate the world that they built from their mind as well. And let's say Tolkien was a very racist bastard. I don't know him, so I don't know. I definitely don't see that in his work. Unless I really, really look for it. And for me to do that, I must have to be thinking about it all the time. It's like people will look at a character like Sauron and be like, I see Trump. Like, oh, okay. That's... Really? Like, the resemblance is uncanny. Like, you're gonna see parallels. If you're always obsessed about something, you're gonna see that in it.